Hello, my name is Nicole Arnell, and I will be discussing CAP6, physical activity and disease. Number one cause of death worldwide would be cardiovascular disease. It is found on page 588 in our textbook in chapter 22. The most common forms of cardiovascular disease are coronary heart disease and stroke. This is found on page 589. As you can see, I've posted a picture from figure 22.2 showing that coronary heart disease takes up the mass majority of cardiovascular disease, followed up by stroke. Um, let's see, coronary heart disease occurs when the coronary arteries become narrowed or blocked, most commonly because of atherosclerosis. I know I'm probably saying this incorrectly. Atherosclerosis involves the buildup of plaque within the arterial walls. Over time, plaque restricts blood flow to the heart. If a plaque ruptures and blood clot forms, the artery can become completely blocked, potentially causing a myocardial infarction or heart attack. This is found on page 590. And then strokes occur when blood flow to part of the brain is interrupted. I'm going to say this one wrong again. An ischemic or ischemic stroke, which is the most common type, occurs when a blood vessel supplying the brain becomes blocked by thrombus or embolus. A hemorrhagic stroke occurs when a blood vessel in the brain ruptures and causes bleeding. Both conditions can damage brain tissue because the affected area does not receive adequate oxygen and nutrients. This is also found on page 591 of the textbook. Controllable risk factors for hypertension. According to the textbook, the primary controllable risk factors for hypertension include obesity and overweight, diet, which includes sodium intake and alcohol, and use of tobacco products, use of oral contraceptives, psychosocial stress, and physical inactivity. The text also identifies obesity as an independent risk factor for hypertension and explains that substantial reductions in blood pressure can occur with weight loss. Additionally, physical inactivity is the risk for hypertension, while increasing physical activity tends to reduce elevated blood pressure. So this is found on page 598 of chapter 22. The relationship between physical activity, disease/mortality. Research shows dose-response relationship between physical activity and health. In general, as the amount of physical activity increases, the risk of premature mortality and several chronic diseases decrease. However, the relationship is not completely linear. The largest health benefits occur when a person goes from being inactive to becoming somewhat active. This means that even relatively small increases in activity can provide meaningful health benefits. A large meta-analysis found that people in progressively higher levels of physical activity had substantially lower mortality than the least active group. Importantly, light intensity activity was also associated with lower mortality, meaning that exercise does not have to be vigorous to provide benefits. The research also demonstrates that increasing physical activity is associated with lower risk of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and other chronic diseases. The relationship is generally curvilinear, meaning that the health benefits are greatest at the lower end of the activity scale. and become smaller as activity levels continue to increase. Therefore, the main message I take from the article is that doing something is much better than doing nothing. A person who is currently inactive does not have to immediately perform a high intensity exercise to improve their health. So, exercise and CBD. Based on the readings that we've explored in the past, in week 6 and 7, which would be chapters 13, 16, and 22, I would recommend aerobic exercise, resistance training, and regular daily physical activity. These exercises can be done from 150 to 300 minutes per week in a moderate aerobic activity, 75 to 150 minutes per week in a vigorous aerobic activity. And then for resistance training, it's recommended for at least 2 days a week. There should be a combination of moderate and vigorous activity, as well as rest time. So these are moderate intensity, vigorous intensity, and gradual progression of intensity. These can be found in chapter 13 and 16 as far as the exercise for sports and sedentary. Let's get there. Sedentary time and CBD. So overall, according to the textbook, too much sedentary time is associated with an increased risk of cardiovascular disease and premature mortality. Even individuals who exercise regularly can benefit from reducing the amount of time they spend sitting. Therefore, people should not only participate in regular exercise, but also reduce prolonged periods of inactivity by incorporating more movement into their daily lives. This can include standing, walking, breaking up long periods of sitting throughout the day. So, in short, too much sitting increases the risk of disease. Cardiovascular disease equals a higher risk with more sedentary time. Premature death is from a higher risk with prolonged inactivity. But on the plus side, regular exercise does not completely eliminate the risk of excessive sitting. Reduce sitting time, avoid long periods of sitting, take movement breaks, and increase daily activity. And these are my references, our textbook and the assigned article on dose-response relationship of physical activity to premature and total all-cause and cardiovascular disease mortality in walkers. Thank you so much for listening.